The temperature was good earlier today. I don't know why it gets so hot.
Hello, is that you, Greg?
It is indeed. Can you guys hear me okay?
Can hear you just fine, thank you. Can you
Awesome.
hear us okay?
Yeah, a little bit of an echo, but I can make it all out, no problem.
That's kind of normal for here. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Looks like there's somebody else joining here. And looks like GMP associate.
Yeah, it should be Kate, I think.
Yes, hello. Good evening.
Good evening, Kate. Hello, Rita. Looks like we got Jeannie Mark as well.
We should have one more from my company joining also here.
Gotcha. We've got the 4 counselors, 2 staff in here today, 1 counselor online.
Alrighty.
And then we should be ready to go here soon, within a couple minutes.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're still waiting for him to show up here also, get online.
Okay.
I talked with him about an hour ago, so I'm expecting him to come in here any moment.
Okay. Just make sure here.
Does anybody do anything fun besides Jack Hospital while I was with us persons listening?
Oh, yeah.
There's Tim.
Oh. Went to Vegas.
Still got the shirt
and I
on your
lost
back.
$50 on the Seahawks 49ers game. That's okay, because my husband's out. He's a
50 seconds. Let's step back and I'll be back in about 30 seconds here, okay?
Bet on the Seahawks against the 49ers.
Well, because I would have made 250, and you know what, for the first half, I thought I had it. There was some marital discord in my family, for my household for the first half. And then the second half, the 49ers showed up, and my husband's a happy camper, and I lost $50. Okay, I don't see it to irritate him, so.
Is he taking you out to dinner?
He already did that. It's kind of a precursor. We have a long-standing rivalry. I've always been a Seahawks fan, and he's always been a 49ers fan.
Okay. Work session. Call to order. It's the 17th of January already. And we're meeting at 6:30, not 8:30. Okay, Chad.
All right, thank you, council. I would, so this work session again is to discuss the recruitment process for the police, chief of police, as Jeff Bowman is retiring. With us, we have GMP consultants. And if you guys, what I do is maybe we just go around real quick and introduce yourselves for us.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
A little bit of background.
I'll start here. I'm Greg Prothman. I'm the owner of GMP Consultants. I'm actually a city manager by training. I was a city manager for 9 years in the city of Des Moines, Washington. Also a waterfront community, by the way. I think you're waterfront, aren't you? Yeah, that's it. Okay, sorry. Our town was a little larger. We were about 30,000 with a marina of about 900 boats. I was there for 9 years, was the assistant for 3 years prior, but I've been in the executive search industry now for almost 22 years. And so very excited to be helping you in this search if we can. Tim, you want to go over your background?
Sure. Again, good evening. My name is Tim Troxel. I'm a consultant with GMP. I've known Greg for, I think, about 35 years now. We at one point worked together when we were both patrol officers in a little town called Renton, just south of Seattle. I stayed there 28 years. Greg left to go to the dark side of city management.
Indeed.
And I promoted up through the ranks, spending the last 7 years of my career as a deputy chief with Renton, and saw growth in a city of about 40,000 people up to about 100,000. So I'm happy to be here to help you. I'm kind of the law enforcement go-to person on this search, and I'm excited to work with you folks. Good evening.
Thanks, Tim. And Kate?
Yes, good evening, Council. Kate Hansen. I am a project manager. I have worked with nonprofits, private business and government, and excited to be a part of the GMP team here. I think we've got a great thing going, doing a lot of great work. So with this search, I will be on the back end, working with keeping our schedule moving forward. Also, when we get to the candidate review section, I will be interfacing with candidates on the back end to keep them informed of what they need to know, and supporting Tim and Greg in our process here.
Thanks, Kate. Not with us tonight, as she had a prior commitment, is Sarah Marsh. Sarah Marsh is our content designer. She is the one who will be designing your profile, adding all of the verbiage to it. She's also a professional writer by training, and brings an MBA as well as a bachelor's degree to the team. So Sarah will be your, in addition to Tim and myself, your first point of contact, soliciting as much information as we can get from the city to craft your position profile, and going from there. That's the team right now. Where would you like to go next?
Well, thank you, Greg. We have kind of the project work plan in front of us. The city council previously has been given both the agreement and some of the examples of work that you've done elsewhere.
Okay.
So at this point, because this is your bailiwick, I was kind of hoping you folks would take it from here, and then staff and council and I will provide you with information and feedback.
Be happy to do that, and I'm prepared to head down that pathway. Does everybody have a copy of the little agenda that we put together for tonight's meeting?
Yeah, phase 1, phase 2 agenda.
Well, actually, this is just for tonight. That's actually the work program, and that's fine. What I thought we would talk about tonight is introductions, which we've accomplished, the recruitment schedule, to talk about how long it'll take and sort of the steps that are involved in getting us from here to there. The profile development, what we need from you on that topic, who we should be interviewing to get a better sense of the position in the organization. And then lastly, our recruitment strategy as to how far and wide we ought to be casting the net for candidates. If that sounds agreeable, we can start with the recruitment schedule and talk about that.
Yes, it does.
All right, now not hearing anybody shaking their head no, I'll move forward. All right, Kate, if you could maybe go over the schedule briefly for us.
Absolutely. I believe, let's see, we do not have screen sharing enabled. So I'm not able to pull up right now the schedule for you folks to see in front of you.
I can do that for you. I just need to know one at a time when you need it done. So I'll go ahead and do yours first. Just 1 second.
And folks, that
Thanks so
voice
much.
there is Christy. She is our assistant here. She takes care of all sorts of things, so she'll be assisting you with that.
Perfect. Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome. Okay, you should be able to share now.
Okay. All right. Is everyone able to see this spreadsheet here?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So this is the draft schedule that we have put together for you folks. We'll ask everyone to cross-check schedules and everything, because I know we definitely, especially with a council, everyone's got various availability. So we're putting this out there as a starting point, and then from there we can adjust and adapt where needed. So we have our kickoff meeting here today. And then going into this blue section here, that's going to be our profile development time. So we have all of the information that we will be collecting that will happen in the next few weeks here. There is a checklist first thing up for you folks. There's a checklist that Sarah puts together that has a variety of questions that will be information for you to provide that will help her putting that profile together. So we would ask that you try and get that back to us by the 13th of February in order to keep moving on this timeline.
And I might add that the more information you can give us about why you choose to live and work and in your cases, be public servants in Gerhardt would really help us then help potential candidates understand that also. So the more we get from you, the stronger this profile will be and the better we can represent your city. So it's really while it's a checklist, it's really a plea for help. So we can really represent your city as best we can to potential candidates out there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. And then after we've obtained that information and somewhat in tandem, we will be working on profile development. Sarah will start pulling together the actual profile itself. And in the meantime, Tim and Greg can be meeting with stakeholders that would include any key players on your end that would be valuable to have their input and their insights into what you folks are looking for. So
I might ask Tim to comment a little bit on this as to, Tim will be serving sort of as the lead law enforcement consultant here. So I think it's very important for him to understand really what the scope and nature of the job is. And, Tim, who would it be useful for you to talk to get a sense of that, do you think?
I think if there's people in the police department, both commissioned and or non-commissioned, that have been working with your current chief and can give us some background on what's been working well with the current chief and what you'd like to see change, as well as you as council members. I'm sure you have ideas and wishes on what you'd like to see in the next chief to take your department from where it is to the next level. And so maybe other department heads or stakeholders in the community that might have input for us to help develop that profile for your next chief would be great.
And if there's any community members out there that I think would be helpful, that would be good to hear also. I know that the best police departments are the ones that have a very close working relationship with the people they serve. So oftentimes the business community can be a critical part of that. So as well as city administration too. There's more on the administrative side of people we should be talking to. So Kate, thank you.
Yes. So as you may be seeing, this is definitely one of the key points in here where we're going to be seeking more input and time from you folks on your end. So this will be an important part here up front, getting everything pulled together and getting that profile right for you folks. So then we have slated for March 1st. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone have a question? Oh, okay. March 1st, we have slated for profile approval and a schedule check-in to just make sure everything's going according to the current timeline. And then in this green section here, we will move into advertising. So that's where we will be sending out our targeted mailer and posting to online job boards and reaching out to our network to get the word out about your position and start collecting applications for that.
And this might be a good time to chat a little bit about really how far and wide we should be casting the net for this position. I mean, ideally, and Tim, I'll invite you to comment on this. Ideally, our best opportunity, the best candidate would be best to come from Oregon. I mean, they're already Oregon certified. They already know Oregon policing. That would be just the very best opportunity. But really, we found in our doing a lot of police chief work that, good candidates come really the best from up and down the West Coast. Washington and or California. It's oftentimes you can find a very, very talented retired police professional at age 52 or 51 out of California or Washington that really wants to stay in their profession, that would love to come to a town like yours. Also, I would say that just to be conservative right now, because we're not seeing as many candidates applying for jobs as we might hope, given the great resignation and I think the whole world is seeing that right now. There's not many people who are applying for jobs. So I would also offer that we should look at Idaho, maybe Utah, down in Arizona, and advertise in those areas. Now, we will be national by the very fact that we'll be on a number of national websites where police professionals would look for new positions. So we may well get candidates from across the nation, but I would offer the following sort of biases. And Tim, if you see it differently, please let me know. But I think policing in the South and policing in the East is remarkably different than policing in the West Coast, just for the cultural differences. And also any so those are all reasons why I think that is best to look for somebody in the West Coast. We'd certainly pay close attention to anybody who applies, but we're going to also make sure that they get a good sense of what it's like to live and work in Gerhardt and why it's important to understand Oregon policing. Tim, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, we know a little bit about the size of your department, and it's been made clear that this position as the chief is a working chief. This is not somebody that's going to be sitting behind a desk pushing paper. They're going to be out on the road answering calls for service. And so, your ideal candidate is probably going to come from a larger department, maybe the sergeant or the next level up in supervision, that wants to move to a coastal town like yours and really embrace the community, but also be involved in police work. Coming from a medium-sized department, once you made the rank above sergeant, you weren't really on the road that much anymore. So finding somebody in that first or second level of supervision in a medium-sized department might be your ideal candidate. As Greg mentioned, West Coast, probably preferable, but I think going as far east as the Rockies, maybe Colorado, and he mentioned maybe Utah and Arizona. There should be some really good candidates there that fit your qualifications and your desires.
So, Council, how are we doing so far in terms of how far and wide we should be looking? Does that match your sense of appropriateness?
It does for me.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, because of the certifications that are required, that they have to become certified as a police officer within, I think it's 2.5 years if they're from out of state, and then they have to get their management certification within, I think it's 18 months. Ideally, it would be somebody from Oregon who understands Oregon, because the last thing we want is to get somebody in here who shows up and says, whoa, I didn't know it rained so much, and have them take off again. And also I agree with your assessment. I'm former law enforcement also, and I would agree with your assessment that our ideal candidates would probably, the best fit for this area would probably come from the West Coast. California, Oregon, or Washington would be my preference, with a real concentration on Oregon, so that they come already, somewhat ready to go.
And even though you're pretty small and don't have a labor union, I still think understanding someone coming from a right to work state into Oregon, they've never done as well as I might have hoped. And so it's not a big issue because you don't have a union, but nonetheless, the thought process is entirely different, I think, Sue. So, okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I think that Dana's got a really good point. I think whomever it is that you guys, or that we look at, has to understand how much it rains here. And it isn't just the rain. I mean, it's gray all, for 9.5, 10 months out of the year. So psychologically, that gets a lot of people down. And
we went through a very similar discussion up in Astoria, looking for their city manager. I wanted to make sure that any potential candidate there also had that same understanding. And as I told the city council in Astoria, that one of the benefits we should put in the compensation elements is a free umbrella. So
it does. I would suggest Alaska too after your list. So
yeah. So, but good point, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and in Alaska. I don't know if you guys heard that last part, but it sounds like, is Alaska something that you can pull from?
Well, it's certainly down in Southeast Alaska, that's for sure. We've done work up there also. All right. Any other comments, questions?
Just real quick, can you kind of tell us, I don't think it's coming up later, and I apologize if it is, but what is the market looking like? Can you tell us what you've been seeing over the last few minutes?
I certainly can. Boy, I tell you, it's about as tight as I've ever seen it. I think, we're doing a whole bunch of searches out there, and I would say that, let me just take Montlake Terrace as an example. I've done that search a couple of times over the years. In previous searches, we've gotten perhaps 40 to 50 applicants. Had we done that search, say 5-6 years ago, we might have gotten 20 applicants. I expect we're going to get 10 to 15 applicants now, and they've raised the salary up to almost $200,000. And so what we're really seeing is that there is this large preponderance of people that have now decided to retire that generally represent about half of the applicant pool. And so as a result, we're just not seeing a whole bunch of number two folks being ready to apply because frankly, they've eliminated a lot of the mid-level managers' jobs in the last couple of recessions. So we're seeing a real small number of people applying. We're still getting quality candidates in the top 4 or 5 or 6, but we're having to work a lot harder for them. And it's sort of my general overview of the market right now.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Great. Kate, you want to move forward and continue, please?
Sure thing. So then moving forward in our timeline here in that yellow section, we will be moving into candidate review. We have a first review for you folks scheduled for April 2nd, and that will be Tim reviewing all of the candidates who have applied and selecting candidates to move forward to semifinal interviews that he will conduct via Zoom. So he will do an additional thorough assessment of those folks there. And while he is working on that, I on the back end will be putting together candidate packets that will include his review notes of all of those candidates as well. And all of those materials will then get pushed forward to you folks as we move into our work session, which is this red section here. And right now we currently have slated the week of April 17th to do a work session for you folks. That could maybe something that needs to get scheduled as a special meeting, depending on your calendar schedules there. And that, yeah.
Yeah, let me add a few comments if you don't mind keeping. Thank you, Kate, for your patience. The semifinal interviews, one would ask potentially, well, why aren't we included in those? Well, you certainly could be, but sometimes I find that it's a bit of a waste of time at this level because we're interviewing as many folks that we think even barely meet sort of the minimum qualifications for the job to make sure we don't miss anybody. We then take pretty detailed notes of what we've learned, and along with their resume, their cover letter, and their application materials, and then Tim's notes and my notes, we'll then forward that on to you. So when we sit down with you, you have sort of the cream of the crop to look at that point. We'll be happy to bring or send you, the resumes of those we didn't interview, just so you can understand why we didn't choose to look at those folks. It'll be pretty obvious, actually. But we want to make sure your time is value added and that you're really getting into the meat of the candidate pool and able to make good, solid decisions at that point. So was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Tim, or did that cover it?
No, I think you covered it. You hit it right. You hit the nail on the head with that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Kate, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So then we will move into the work session, which is when Greg and Tim will meet with the council to review those semifinalists and go over the findings from those meetings, get feedback. And you folks will be selecting finalists to move forward onto those final interviews that will be the in-person interviews with yourselves and potentially other panels that you choose to have as a part of that process.
That's actually where we design the final interview process and really listen to you as to who you think you want to include as advisors. If I understand your charter correctly, you are the selection body for this. And so you're the ones who are burdened with that responsibility of selection. You may choose to ask for advice from panels. That'd be awesome if you do. We've done that a bunch before. We've actually held receptions the night before for the candidates, so you get to know them a little more one-on-one. But ultimately, I want to defend pretty strongly your right to decide. And so not to being told who to hire from panels, we really encourage any panels you choose to use to have just to really look at its strengths and weaknesses only and not to rank those candidates. That really is your job, is to rank. But it's more important to hear their insights as to what they liked and what their concerns were, so you can take all of that as good, solid information.
Great, thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
So then, yes, as Greg was saying in that work session, the other thing that will be done is making decisions about how those final interviews are going to look. Any panels in addition to yourself, as well as if you have a reception or tours, or anything else like that that's involved. We have a checklist that we'll go through with you folks to determine all of those things, and as well as reimbursements, what you are not going to reimburse for candidate travel for those interviews. So all that will be completed in the work session. And then we will move on to preparing for those final interviews. So purple section here, the weeks of April 24th and May 1st, we will be doing those background checks on your finalist candidates, reference checks, pulling together all those materials for you to have to review in advance, as well as working with you to make sure we have all of the details squared away for those in-person interviews. And while all that's happening, I will be coordinating with the candidates to make sure they have the information that they need for all the schedules and everything that's going on during that time. So then we will have your finalist interviews currently slated for the week of May 8th. We will get those packets to you for review 4 days prior to those interviews. And then after that, moving into the week of May 15th for hopeful candidate appointment.
So, okay. That's a quick overview of the schedule. Okay, any comments, thoughts, ideas, concerns at this point?
I have a question. Greg, when you said 200,000 as a salary, is that the going wage for a police chief now?
Well, for your city with your size complexity, I was thinking probably 250. I'm sorry. It was an honest question.
Do I need to wake you up? I am just sitting here, thinking this guy is really serious.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. No, not at all. It really is relevant to the size organization, what your previous salary was, all of those elements come into play. And we'd want to talk with you a bit more about what the salary is. And I can give you a better impression of what I think the market is once I get a better sense of what you've been paying currently.
Okay.
Yeah,
Defer to this one.
Give an example of a moderate sized department that's.
yeah. So, and Tim, do you recall what the salary is for the deputy chief in Ashland right now? I don't.
It's the low end is 99.
And what's the top end at? Do you recall?
I can pull
I think
that.
it's actually I think I do. It's 140 or 120 if I recall.
That sounds about right.
So I mean, there's a data point for you. Now Ashland's a bigger department, but that's the deputy. We could look at one of their lieutenants as being maybe an equivalent. I mean, that's sort of the level of analysis we ought to be thinking about. Okay.
Thank you.
Chair, do I make you feel any better now rather than?
I'm smiling.
Thank you. And I'm still on the Zoom call, so I guess that's good news. All right, other comments, thoughts, ideas, questions, concerns?
I'm sure that what we'll do is with Christie is we'll get you the dates that are in what we were just talking about. And we'll shoot those dates to you as soon as possible so you can use them as placeholders. I'm sure there's probably going to be a few things to change, but those dates seem to work within the city calendar as well so far. So we'll let you more there. In the past, when we've been discussing kind of how this has worked, I've worked with GMP before and I've worked with the other group as well. And there are features, something to think about is how it is that you want to set up the interview process. I've been involved to where it's been a staff interview, the public and residents, and then the city council. We can do a mix of those things as well. They've got a lot more experience in handling these kind of things. That's the kind of stuff we need to be thinking about now, who you might want to have involved in this process to move forward and to make sure that we give our new chief the best shot of getting to know this community and taking on the job and being successful. So we'll rely more upon them with that. And then we'll have to talk about budget. Of course, when it comes to salary, for sure, but we're also gonna have to talk about budget for, you know, some of the extra costs, whether or not we're gonna be flying somebody in, and some of the other package, items that we can offer to a candidate through moving or that, aspect of it. But a lot of that will come in once we realize who some of our top candidates are, where they're from, and how to organize it. But those are still things that I think we're going to approach you with and get your opinions on.
Yeah, the work session is sort of the critical path on all of that. Once we hit the work session and we see what kind of candidates we have and where they're coming from. And once you decide, and this is where you exercise your judgment initially, and that is you select the candidates to come to final interviews. We make recommendations to you. We tell you what we think their strengths and weaknesses are, but ultimately that's your call as council. Then once you've made those decisions, then we work with you on designing those final interviews and provide you sort of a wide variety of opportunities and thoughts around what we think has worked well, what our concerns could be, maybe using a reception the night before, who do you want to invite for that, help you through all of that and help you design that. But again, those are your decisions to make that's appropriate for your community. Once we get that done, then we're like the duck, you know, going across the water, looking very calm on the top, but just really paddling a lot underneath. We make all that happen for you. We'll write potential interview questions for you. We'll build a master schedule of all of the activities happening based upon your direction. We'll facilitate making sure the candidates are up to speed and are there on a timely fashion and know what their role is and when and where and how, including making, working with staff to make reservations for hotels, all of the stuff that you need to do to make it so ultimately your job should be as easy as possible to make a final decision on a candidate without having to worry about all of the extraneous other details. That's sort of the value added proposition we hope to bring. Not only can we source candidates that might be on a broader reach than what the city can, and we should be able to help weed out the ones we think are incompetent and not really good for the role. And lastly, we should make your job easier in terms of appointment. Now, having said all that, if for some reason we don't find the right candidate in that first go around, please don't appoint. Don't feel like you have to do it right away. I'd much rather go back out and resource, take a little extra time and money to do this, to get the right person that stays now for that 5 to 7 to 10 year commitment. That's really a good fit for your community. So I really feel strongly about that we don't want to pick somebody that's not the right fit, because you don't want to come back and do this again 10 months from now when we're even in a deeper hole because of a bad fit.
Okay.
All right, was there anything else we needed to cover tonight?
Well, I don't know. Is there anything that we can get started on to get a jump on this?
Well, I think the next step is for Tim and council. I presume you all want to have a conversation with Tim regarding what you think would be the appropriate skills, talents, and abilities you're looking for. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
And that should maybe occur individually, or would you like to do it tonight collectively?
Do you need time to prepare, or do you want to have a private conversation with, or do you want to continue this meeting, speak to him tonight?
I'd like to have a private conversation because I'm not prepared to do that tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, I would do it with other members of the council, but right now I was under the impression that we weren't going to step up and do something like that. It's just.
Yeah, and I think that, doing the individual conversations with you folks would probably garner a lot more information than getting together as a group. So I would actually advocate for that if it works out for everybody to have that individual conversation with them. We can get together as a group and talk about some of those ideas with the help of this team afterwards, so that we're all on the same page anyway. But I think that would foster, I agree with that, the best way to go. So if you folks are in agreement, yeah, we can set that up.
I think that's perfectly fair, and I think it's a great process to do. So, okay, so one of our next steps will be is Tim will be reaching out to talk about Tim and Kate. I'm not sure who's going to take the lead on this, but it'll be a tag team approaching, working with you to set up those times, probably in the next week or so, to get moving on those things. Or Tim, I think you're out of town next week, aren't you?
I am out of town next week, but I certainly have time this week if there's some or all of you want to squeeze some stuff in before the end of the week. That's
Great. Because I don't think there's any internet down in Mexico where you're going. So, sorry.
yeah. I don't
But,
know.
but
Yeah.
if you could do it this week, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Is there anything we should think about ahead of those interviews? So I see on here you have 3 to 5 issues facing the new chief in the next 6 months. There are specific things that you want us to think about ahead of those interviews?
Yeah, you know, you have a golden opportunity here to think about what worked well with your last chief. What did you really like about what that chief brought to the table? Okay. And with all due respect to that chief, whom I don't know at all, what do you want to see different? What would you like to see maybe as a moving forward proposition? What skills, talents, and abilities that you want to see in this new chief? Okay, so you can use that as a comparison to think that through. You know, what you liked and what do you want to see different? And again, skills, talents, and abilities and fit are the sort of the things that I would say would be most relevant for the conversation.
So what I'll do is I'll give you my availability, Chad, and you can, if we all give you our availability, you can then pass it on.
What I'm thinking is, if you wouldn't mind, I think I would prefer to give them your personal contact email, well, your work emails for the city council, and then maybe your mobile phones. And then they can reach out to you and make those appointments.
That's perfect.
That would be, keep us out of the mix, probably a little smoother.
Okay.
And typically what we'll do is set up a Zoom interview if that works for you, or if that's not going to work, we can set up certainly a phone call. But Kate, could I trouble you to reach, Chad, would it be best to reach out to you for that information from council on their contact information?
Miss Christie will be, and Kate will probably work together on that.
Okay, that would be awesome. Then Kate, if you could do that. And then Tim, if you could then, once you get that information, or actually, Tim, you could do that just as easy as Kate, sorry. Just get that information as soon as you can and then see what you can set up before you leave this weekend.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, does that work for everybody, council?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
One of the things I wanted to ask was, just for food for thought for us is going into that next work session. I know we'll probably talk more about how we set up those interviews, but if you have examples of how you involve the public in past interview processes, that'd be good for us to think about ahead of that work session. So we might come up with some ideas or some conversations to feed into that.
You know, what I've done in the past, just to give you a quick comment on that, is invite your public, invite your partners, you know, both maybe at the county level, you know, the sheriff, other police departments you work with, you know, and business leaders, and anybody you think would be appropriate that this person would come in contact with, that would be good for you to hear from. We then have a very sort of a social kind of a setting where we might start the thing from say 7 o'clock to maybe 8:30 as an example. And just have people mill around and talk to folks and get to know them a bit. And it's really very casual. We'll then have comment cards printed and available for everybody to provide their thoughts and insights on what they liked and what their concerns were, and each of the candidates that get invited. Then we'll collect those up, of course, at the end of the night and make sure that you have availability to those the next day. Okay. Perhaps we should also schedule maybe the first hour from 6 to 7 an executive session to where it's just the council and the candidates. So you get to know them a bit more one-on-one. Hi, how are you? First name basis. You'll get a chance to spend 15, 20 minutes with each candidate without the pressure of anybody else there, you know, from the public. We found that to be hugely valuable in terms of, because there's two ways that you're going to act here. Number one is interpersonally, whether you like this person or like their background and them, and then corporately as a council as you come together to select. And so those are both important components to pay attention to. So that, Councilor, that would be my sort of off the top of my head thought process for what we might think about in terms of a public session.
Great.
Hope that was helpful and hope that was close to what maybe you had in mind.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there had been different ways that you've done in the past, and if there's been ways that have worked better than others. So that's great. That sounds like that's a good approach to doing it. I was just curious yeah, if we had multiple options, what those might be, so.
And there's various subtleties to those we can chat about more too when we get down to making the decision too. Okay. Other questions? Good questions so far. Anything else?
What's your gut feeling? I know that you are just now starting to do the deep dive into the information about our city, but just looking at us from a, just on a piece of paper standpoint, what's your gut feeling as far as hurdles that we're gonna have to overcome, aside from the usual challenges with recruitment and law enforcement right now? What challenges did you have in Astoria, for
I'll
example?
tell you, it's funny. Only certain kinds of people would use the term gut reaction to something initially, and only former law enforcement would use it in the context like that.
Yeah.
I figured that part out pretty quickly, even if he hadn't mentioned it to me. But I think the answer to your question is really going to be fit, number one, and fit with the community, fit with the coast, fit with the environment there. That'll be your first big hurdle to get to, because that's a certain subset of people that love living on the coast. And I think secondly, as Tim pointed out earlier, the deputy chief from a town of 30 commissioned or 40 commissioned officers is not on the road a lot. He or she might back the occasional call during day shift, but they're not pulling many shifts on graveyard. And so I think, as Tim pointed out, really looking for that lieutenant, or, depending upon how they organize the department, or that sergeant, or who has enough administrative skill sets to manage the upper side of being a police chief, yet has all the intact skill sets of being a patrol officer. It's sort of I think that's your next big challenge. Tim, you want to comment on that any further?
No, I think you're right. It's a matter of finding that mix of those skills that has enough administrative experience to be able to run the department, but also is still a mentor, because I think it's a challenge to keep people retained in a department your size as well, and also improve their professional standards. So someone that's going to be able to lead that group, and not only by training, but also lead by example in what they're bringing from their previous job.
Right. And you mentioned, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, and you mentioned the age range, you just threw it out there, and I know this was just an example of the 51-year-old retiree, but really, I guess my worst fear would be finding, I retired at 50, and there's a reason why I retired at 50, because it's really a young man and young woman's game being on patrol, and as you know, it's very physical, active work sometimes. And my greatest desire is to find somebody who is very physically fit, and my greatest worry is that we'll get somebody who is not so physically fit, and then we end up with somebody who is looking for a second retirement, and maybe injured on the job, and that's one of my worries. So I know that we're kind of looking for a very specialized type of skill set, and also level of officer, and all of these things. It's going to make these people aren't going to be very thick on the ground, I don't think.
Well, and let me add to your list of worries.
Oh, thanks.
If we're looking at an Oregon commissioned officer, I don't want to inherit somebody else's problem child.
Right.
Lateral to escape, their third internal investigation. Okay, I didn't mention this earlier in my introduction, but I was an officer for 2 different departments only for 7 years. But at least I got a pretty good taste of the industry, and if I could, while not being particularly competent, I can still speak the language to some degree. Those are all things that go through my mind when we're looking at somebody to come in to be essentially a working patrol officer. And I want to make sure that we have somebody who's got a pretty stellar background also, with no issues back there. And so one of the things that I think I'm going to encourage you to do, if you haven't already thought about it, is our background checks aren't particularly thorough at a police level. They're reference checks at this point. But once you select somebody, I think we need to go through a very detailed criminal history background check, consistent with hiring a brand new police officer. And it might be good to get a third party to think about doing that. And that's probably an extra cost, or what is an extra cost over and above what we could do, but I have a number of recommendations as to who could do it. And, you know, Tim has also done, well, Tim, you managed an internal investigation, didn't you, at Renton for a period of time?
I did internal investigations and also did the background section of the department. So I've seen everything when we hire non-commissioned or commissioned officers, but also looking at the, you know, dealing with people. When you get to be an administrator, you're not so much a cop anymore. You're dealing with the goofy, silly things that people do in their job. And unfortunately, sometimes that bad stuff the cops do. So you see all of it.
So it could be that Tim could be available to go do the background checks, do the site visits potentially. We could talk more about that when we get down to that level. So, but that's the only piece of concerns that I had for your list. So. All good questions. Other comments, thoughts, questions, concerns?
Preston, you got anything?
Not at this time.
Ed, anyone?
No.
Tom?
Nope, I'm good.
Sounds like we're good right now.
Okay, very good. We have our marching orders for what we're going to get done here ASAP. So the things on our to-do list include Tim getting a hold of your contact information and reaching out to you tomorrow, scheduling times. Kate, to get, if you haven't already sent it, to resend again the draft schedule so we can get that out. And lastly, while Sarah's not on the call, I will talk with her tomorrow about getting the information request for the profile out, the checklist. So those are all things we'll get done tomorrow. We'll get moving.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start working on some pictures for the brochure, some nice, bright, sunny pictures of people doing nothing but catching salmon. And I can't catch salmon either. So, yeah.
And also included in this information will be Tim's contact information, both his cell and his email. And I'm going to invite any of you to contact him or myself at any point in time during the search if you have questions, concerns, comments. Don't hesitate, okay?
And Tim, I want to reach out to you here soon to talk to you more about the budget and to talk about that near the end when we're looking at background checks and things like that. I'd like to kind of just try to figure that out so we can start putting some budget dollars aside for that.
And Chad, I can help with that too if you like.
Okay, good, Greg. Thank you. Tim, yeah, I know you're on a tight schedule getting out of here by the end of the week, so I'll work with Greg then.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure to meet you virtually. And
Miss Rita, did you have any questions or
I
anything?
had a really stupid question and I hesitated to speak up lest I sponsor my own ignorance. However, on the paper that you gave to us, which you and Chad signed, Chad is listed as Chad Sweet, but you are not listed with your name. You're listed as Greg President. Is there any reason for that? Although you signed it with your real name.
if I signed it with my real name, that would be my intention. And it would be Greg Prothman, President, unless it got somehow truncated on the printing process.
No,
It
it's
did.
just Greg
Yeah.
President. So I just wondered if that made it, I'm not a lawyer, I just wondered if that had any bearing on the validity of the document.
It's just hard to read, Counselor, because of where it was signed due to the electronics, but it's all there.
All right. And once again, I apologize. I feel like death on a stick, so forgive me.
I think it's important to have a viable contract and one that's defensible. So I think if you had a concern around it, it was appropriate to ask the question, and I hardly think it was dumb.
Okay,
So
thank
thank
you
you.
very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, so they just, somebody cut and paste. Yeah, somebody.
Okay, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time tonight. I guess we'll sign off here, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
I think we should type.
Rita, I just went and checked with him. Apologies for the swift ending, but the meeting is adjourned.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, he
Bye-bye.
clicked the button a little too quick.
All right, bye-bye.
Feel better. Bye.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.